What happens when one of Hollywood's most legendary actors faces off against television's most aggressive host? You won't believe what unfolds when Harrison Ford sits down with Michael Strahan on Good Morning America, only to find himself trapped in an ambush that would leave viewers stunned and the entertainment world buzzing. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control when egos clash and boundaries are crossed. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. The tension was palpable from the moment Harrison Ford walked onto the Good Morning America set. At 82 years old, the Indiana Jones star had agreed to appear on the morning show to promote his latest project. But what he didn't expect was Michael Strahan's immediately confrontational approach. The former NFL player turned television host had clearly done his homework, and it wasn't the kind of preparation Ford was hoping for. "Harrison, great to have you here." Strahan began with his trademark smile that somehow managed to feel both welcoming and predatory at the same time. "Now, I've got to ask you about something that's been making headlines. Your recent comments about the younger generation of actors. Some people are calling them pretty harsh." Ford's expression immediately shifted. The seasoned actor, known for his no-nonsense attitude and occasional gruffness with the press, clearly hadn't expected Strahan to lead with such an aggressive angle. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Michael," Ford replied, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone, but with an edge of irritation. Strahan leaned forward, clearly relishing the opportunity to press his advantage. "Well, you said in a recent interview that today's actors don't have the same work ethic, that they're more concerned with their social media presence than actually acting. That's got to sting for some of these young performers who look up to you." "That's not exactly what I said," Ford shot back, his jaw tightening visibly. "And I don't appreciate having my words twisted to create some kind of manufactured controversy." The atmosphere in the studio grew thick with tension as Strahan pressed on, seemingly oblivious to, or perhaps enjoying, Ford's mounting frustration. "But you did say something along those lines, didn't you? I mean, we have the quotes right here." Strahan held up what appeared to be printed pages, though the camera angle made it impossible to see what was actually written on them. Ford's legendary patience was already wearing thin, and anyone familiar with his previous interviews could see the warning signs. His responses became shorter, his posture more rigid, and that famous Ford stare, the one that had intimidated countless co-stars and directors over the decades, was now fixed squarely on his host. "What I said," Ford began, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register, "was taken completely out of context, and frankly, I'm surprised that someone in your position would choose to." But Strahan wasn't finished. With the confidence of someone who had clearly planned this ambush, he interrupted Ford mid-sentence, a move that would prove to be a critical mistake. "Harrison, let's be honest here. You've got a reputation for being difficult to work with. Some people say you're just an old-school guy who can't adapt to how Hollywood works now." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Ford's expression darkened considerably. What had started as a promotional appearance was rapidly transforming into something much more volatile, and Strahan seemed determined to push every button he could find. Ford sat back in his chair, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Difficult to work with?" he repeated, his voice carrying decades of barely contained frustration with exactly this type of sensationalist journalism. "Michael, I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've worked with everyone from Steven Spielberg to George Lucas, and somehow they all keep asking me back. But sure, let's go with your narrative." Strahan, emboldened by what he clearly saw as Ford cracking under pressure, doubled down with the ruthlessness of someone who smelled blood in the water. "Well, there are stories, Harrison. We've all heard them. Cast members walking on eggshells around you, directors having to handle you with kid gloves. Even your Han Solo co-stars have mentioned your intensity. The mention of his Star Wars colleagues was clearly the wrong move. Ford's eyes flashed with genuine anger now, and his voice dropped to that dangerously quiet tone that anyone who knew him would recognize as a warning. You want to talk about my co-stars? The same co-stars who've remained close friends for decades? The ones who've publicly defended me countless times? But there have been incidents. Strahan pressed, consulting his notes with theatrical precision. On-set disagreements, creative differences that got heated. Sources say you once threw a script across a room during filming. Ford leaned forward now, his legendary composure finally beginning to crack in earnest. Sources? What sources? Anonymous gossip from entertainment blogs? Michael, I thought Good Morning America had higher standards than tabloid journalism. The insult hit its mark, and for the first time, Strahan's practiced smile faltered slightly. But instead of backing down, he chose to escalate further, a decision that would prove catastrophic. Higher standards? Harrison, we're just asking the questions that America wants answered. Your fans deserve to know who you really are behind all that Hollywood mystique. Who I really am? Ford's voice rose for the first time, and the camera captured every nuance of his mounting fury. I'm someone who's spent half a century entertaining people, creating characters that have meant something to audiences around the world. But apparently, that's not enough for you. You need to create drama where none exists. The studio audience, who had been uncomfortably silent throughout this exchange, began to shift restlessly. This was clearly not the light-hearted celebrity interview they had expected to witness. Even the camera operators seemed uncertain, zooming in to capture every micro-expression of Ford's increasingly volatile emotional state. Strahan, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the situation, but unable to stop himself, made one final, devastating miscalculation. Look, Harrison, I'm just doing my job here. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Ford stared at Strahan with an expression of pure disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process what he had just heard. The veteran actor's hands clenched slightly on the arms of his chair, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow more menacing than if he had shouted. Can't handle tough questions? Ford repeated slowly, each word dripping with controlled fury. Michael, I've been handling tough questions since before you knew what a football looked like. The difference is, real journalists ask questions that matter. They don't manufacture controversy to boost their ratings. Strahan, realizing too late that he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross, attempted damage control. Harrison, I didn't mean to suggest. No, you meant exactly what you said. Ford cut him off with surgical precision. You think because you've got a camera rolling and an audience watching, you can ambush me with tabloid garbage and I'll just sit here and take it? You think my 5 decades in this business mean nothing? The veteran actor slowly stood up from his chair, his full presence suddenly dominating the studio space. At 82, Harrison Ford still commanded the kind of authority that had made him one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and everyone in that room could feel it. Let me tell you something about handling tough questions, Michael. When real journalists ask me about my craft, my experiences, the characters I've brought to life, those are tough questions because they require thoughtful answers. What you're doing isn't journalism. It's exploitation. Strahan, his confidence completely evaporated, tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. Harrison, please, let's just... I'm done. Ford's voice cut through the studio like a blade. This interview is over. He began unhooking his microphone with decisive movements, his actions speaking louder than any angry outburst could have. You want to know who I really am? I'm someone who respects himself too much to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no respect for his guests or his profession. The studio erupted into chaos as producers scrambled to figure out how to handle the situation. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of Ford's methodical preparation to leave. He handed his microphone to a stunned production assistant with the kind of quiet dignity that somehow made his exit more powerful than any dramatic storming off could have been. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Michael?" Ford turned back one final time, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent studio. "You had an opportunity to have a real conversation with someone who's lived through 50 years of Hollywood history. Instead, you chose to waste everyone's time with this tabloid nonsense. That says everything about who you are as a broadcaster, and nothing about who I am as a person." With those words, Harrison Ford walked off the Good Morning America set, with the same measured confidence he had brought to every iconic character he'd ever played. No shouting, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet authority of a man who knew his own worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. Strahan sat frozen in his chair, the reality of what had just happened washing over him as the cameras finally stopped rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence, having witnessed not just a celebrity interview gone wrong, but a masterclass in dignity under fire. Ford had turned what was meant to be his humiliation into Strahan's downfall, walking away with his reputation intact while leaving his host to face the consequences of his aggressive tactics. The legendary actor had proven once again why he remained Hollywood royalty, not through ego or temper tantrums, but through the quiet strength that had defined his career for half a century.